Dr. Julia Moore. Dr. Moore is a self-described rogue scientist, academic turned into social entrepreneur. She's an award-winning expert on the practical application of implementation science, the science of creating individual, organizational, and systems change. As the executive director of the Center for Implementation, she is internationally known for her ability to communicate complex implementation science concepts in clear and actionable ways. She holds a PhD from Penn State University in Human Development and Family Studies and MS from the Penn State University on Human Development and Family Studies, and a BA in Psychology from University of Alberta, and then over the 15 years of experience on implementation science and practice. So Dr. Moore will join us virtually.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me properly? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I am going to shift gears just a little bit because we've had lots of talks in a row talking about implementation researchers, especially this last one, which talks about training implementation researchers. And so I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about training the people who are on the ground supporting implementation. Sometimes that includes those researchers, and sometimes it's different people. So I just had a fabulous introduction, so thank you. So I'm essentially kind of like a rogue scientist. I was trained to be an implementation researcher and now spend all of my time trying to figure out how we can make implementation science as practical and accessible as possible to the people who are on the ground actually responsible for implementing things. And so I am at the Center for Implementation. We are located in Canada, although almost no one realizes or knows that because we're very international and essentially a virtual organization. And kind of the best way to depict what we do is that we all talk about in implementation science, bridging the research to practice gap. But at the Center for Implementation, or TCI, we try to figure out how can we bridge the implementation science to implementation practice gap by synthesizing and translating and then making really accessible the different theories and models and frameworks from implementation science and using them when we're actually on the ground implementing, spreading, and scaling things. And so it's interesting because we've had a lot of presenters just talk about really specific topic areas. But one of the things we've tried really, really hard to do is to be totally topic agnostic. So that means that we have people from healthcare, we have people from mental health, we have people from social services, education, public health, justice, who are all coming to figure out how they can use implementation science to actually implement and scale things. And we are seeing so much interest in this. These days, in the past couple of years, the interest in using implementation science has skyrocketed, which is really exciting for our field. And specifically, I mentioned that we're shifting gears because of the audience that we really focus on. So we have tried to build capacity, not primarily with implementation researchers, although interestingly, we've had lots of implementation researchers join different courses and programs and use some of the tools that we have in collaboration with the community or organizational partners they have who are on the ground implementing. And so a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, we put on an event and we asked all the people we're working with, hey, can you tell us about the job title you have in supporting implementation? And it was fun and a bit eye-opening to see that people had all of these different job titles. These are people who are supporting implementation, who are trying to use implementation science, but it's not like they have one single job title. Depending on what organization they're in, what system they're in, there's a huge range of job titles, but these are people on the ground, literally like putting evidence into practice or scaling evidence over and over and over again. So that's a bit of background around like who we're working with, who we're trying to support. And one of the underlying premises that we have is that we really, really want to make sure that everything we build is as accessible and practical as possible. And we also want it to be based on the best available evidence. So when we think about how we're supporting capacity building in using implementation science, we have pulled out an implementation science framework. It's called EBSIS, the Evidence-Based System for Implementation Support, which is a long name to say something that makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. Essentially, we like to focus on making sure that people have access to tools, that people have access to training, that people have access to coaching or technical assistance, and that people have access to assess their own implementation quality, all of these related to using implementation science. So sometimes we think about using these in relation to like the evidence, the guideline, the program that you're trying to implement, but how can we use these specifically related to using implementation science in practice? And because I only have a few minutes, I wanted to kind of share a smattering of different resources and things that we have to illustrate how we've really been putting these into practice and using these. So I'm going to start with some tools because I think a lot of people, we've had a lot of interest in tools. I will confess, I never thought I would be like a tool developer, but that is where the world seems to want to go. There's a lot of desire to build tools. And so here are a couple of the examples of tools that we have been using or building to help make implementation science super, super, super accessible. I'm going to talk in a moment and highlight 2 online interactive tools that we have built, and I'll flag that we have 2 more in the works that should come out before the end of 2024, early 2025. We have an online mini course called Inspiring Change I'll talk about in a moment. We have a toolbox that has lots of different like tips and tricks and images, which is one of the people's favorite things to use of ours. And then a newsletter that goes out to talk to people about like how we take these theories and models and frameworks and make them really practical and apply. And so we work with people in lots of different ways, right? So sometimes we're like providing support. Sometimes we're building long-term partnerships or short-term partnerships with people to help them build capacity so that they can have capacity, for example, within the country, within the region, within their organization, so that they can move forward and actually do this work on their own. And then lots of people know us for workshops and online training that I'll talk about in just a second. And I wanted to flag, because I know there's lots of researchers in the room, some of the like numbers, because I know lots of people like numbers. So in the past 6 years, we are 6 years old next month, we have trained over 10,000 people through online courses and workshops. And we have a certificate I'll mention in a moment. And we just had, we've hit 300 people have applied for the level 1 certificate already, which I will confess, I did not anticipate the demand to become certified, but it is large because people want to prove that they know what they're doing when it comes to supporting implementation. As I mentioned, tools are something everyone wants to use. We did not plan to become tool developers, but our most used tool has been accessed 18,000 times in the past 18 months. And so we have started building more tools, and I'll mention the 2 that we have available right now. And because we really want to make everything super, super accessible, we have no exclusion criteria. So everything is online, everything is asynchronous. So we have no maximum number of participants, so people do not get excluded. And every single time we launch a course, we offer free spots to people in low and middle income countries, 20 free spots. There's actually free spots open right now for our Embracing Complexity course that talks about implementation science, complexity theory, and systems thinking, and how we can kind of bring those together. And then we offer large discounts for people in low and middle income countries to really try to make things as accessible as possible to people around the world. And about 25% of people in all of our online courses are from low and middle income countries around the world. I wanted to flag, so I know it's technically not pure capacity building, but the use of tools to actually support the use of implementation science and practice seems to be gaining so much traction. I wanted to share the 2 most popular tools we have. So this is our strategies tool, which if you know about implementation mapping, it is conceptually very, very similar in getting you from barriers and facilitators to picking strategies, using behavior change theory in a really practical way. And this is the one that's being accessed 18,000 times recently. This is one of my favorite tools. It's called Cultivate, and it helps people navigate the science of trust and how to navigate power dynamics in implementation, which we know is really challenging. And so I think this is probably my favorite tool we've built so far. So I wanted to flag that. And this is kind of one of the things that is a great way to get people into implementation science or introduced if they are brand new. It's called Inspiring Change 2.0, and it is like a free mini course. It takes like about an hour and a half to complete. We've had about 9,000 people take this from 112 countries. So it's like a great way to like get people just like kind of interested in what's happening in implementation. And I mentioned that we have this certificate. So I'm going to confess, we kind of built this because people really requested it. It was not totally our plan initially. But people were saying, I need to hire people who know how to use implementation science. Can you send me people who are trained, who we know are actually experienced in doing this? And so we're in the process. We've completely built the level 1 certificate process. And so it's like taking 2 courses and doing a fairly intense assessment component. Like people have to complete questions, they get revisions, they have to resubmit questions and answers. It's fairly intense. And then we're in the process of building out level 2. So 2 of the courses are currently available, and the other 2 will be coming in 2024 and 2025. Oh. And the final thing I wanted to flag, because it came up a couple times actually in the past hour, is core competencies. So there are already lots of competencies related to implementation research, but there are less competencies for implementation support. And so we have done a lot of work this year on building new core competencies for implementation support practitioners. And these are going to come out with lots of free tools and resources and an online quiz, self-assessment quiz, next Tuesday, June 4th. And so if you'd like to join, it'll be there. And then afterwards, all the different pieces will be available for anyone who's kind of interested in what those competencies look like, because we deeply believe in competency-based training. So with that, I want to say a huge thanks. And I wish I could see all of your faces, but it is lovely to be here with you.